but I looked around and I was just like, I don't, maybe I got this wrong. Like, this doesn't feel like what I was looking for. I don't know. I don't know about this. And on the way back through, I spent a week in Paris and was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I've always wanted. Like, what have I been doing with my life? Like, this is what I'm supposed to be. But yeah, I don't know. I think people, it might be partially that the grass is greener on the other side. Maybe they're just looking for an adventure. And it's never been as easy, with planes and the resources that we have now, the ability to work remotely, to just take your laptop and go, set up shop wherever you want. I don't know. I'm sure there's a ton of different reasons. I think, well, I mean, I've lived in a few different places, and I think that most of it was actually sparked by desperation. Maybe not desperation, but I think the whole idea of like the story of how I got to Paris is kind of driven by this desire to be here more than anywhere, but also ending up in, parts of the world that I really didn't want to be in. So I kind of rubber banded between maybe some neutral ground in the middle, but then ending up in places I really didn't want to be. And I think that really fed the fire to be like, I got to figure this out. Like, I know where I want to be. I know exactly where I want to be. How do I get there?
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. Another fantastic chat coming your way. Been a busy week since the last time we spoke. I have been doing a few things with my podcast business. So, update in terms of travel, not a lot. Stuck in Vancouver at the minute, North Vancouver. Trying to find some temp work and work on my side business of podcast editing and management. You'll see in the show notes there are some affiliate links for travel. These will really help you out if you want to book anything from flights to accommodation to car hires to travel insurance to eSIM cards. Whatever's on there, if you click the link, book it, I do get a little commission, so that helps the podcast going forward. And I've also been put to post out onto LinkedIn, social media, or any of those like services that you may need if you're listening. If you want to start a podcast, or if you have a podcast, you can definitely help out with podcast editing, audio editing, video editing, podcast management, guests, research, stuff like that. So that is now all available. So I'm pushing that out into social medias this week and last week. And then finally, I went to a podcast meetup in Vancouver and I met Helen Saltzman, who does the Illusionist podcast. She's one of the originals of podcasting back in 2007 with her original show. And it was great to meet some fellow podcasters, get to hear some ideas, some contacts, different types of genres, and it was really beneficial going forward. So that was really nice to meet up, have a drink and have a chat and meet some new people. That's today's update. Let's get stuck in to this week's guest episode.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm joined by Jay Swanson, who is a video creator, YouTuber, and a writer based in Paris. Today, we're going to talk about Jay's previous travels, why he moved to Paris, what it's like being an American in Paris, and his YouTube show. Jay, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, James. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming on. An obvious question to start off, an easy one. Where are you based right now?
Well, I'm in Paris, just like the intro says.
Yeah, okay. And which part of Paris are you in?
I'm in the western part of Paris. So if your listeners are familiar with the arrondissements, I live in the 16th, but if they're not, just look at Paris on a map, follow the river, and then go west of that.
Okay, cool. I think we stayed in the sort of Bercy area when we were there in February.
Yeah, the Bercy, so the opposite, total opposite side. Yeah, but there's some fun stuff over there too.
Yeah, the walk along the Seine is pretty special.
Yeah, it's amazing. You've got a lot of boats on the river over there too, which are really fun, like some party boats, and there's actually like a lighthouse boat over there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one's interesting. That one's really interesting.
It sounds interesting, yeah. Okay, we're gonna delve into Paris a bit more later.
Which is good because if we keep talking about lighthouse boats, we're gonna start asking questions like, does it warn the Earth? Does it warn the cliffs that the boat is coming? Like, what
is it light just going constantly around when it's in daytime or even nighttime? Does that confuse drivers? I don't know.
Is there just one guy living on it all the time? Lots of questions.
Okay. As people can tell, you're American. So whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Washington State. So when I living in France, I never say that because I know you know where that is because you've
Mm.
traveled quite extensively. But most French contemporaries and even actually Americans, especially East Coasters, if I say Washington, everybody immediately assumes DC,
Yeah.
even if I say state. So I tend to say Seattle, even though that's a lie. I'm not from Seattle, but you can't even say Seattle in French. You have to say Seattle.
Oh God.
Because
Right.
if you
Okay.
just say Seattle, they're like
Yeah.
Seattle, 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 ah ouais, Seattle. And then, Grey's Anatomy, ouais, ouais, we like the end. Yeah, and then it goes from there.
I think it's confusing for you guys because Washington DC does take
Oh,
the
dude, the
biscuit, really.
founders of my state were not experts in branding.
No.
If our state flag is just looks like a dollar bill with a yellow stripe on it, and then from there, yeah, nobody knows the difference. It's kind of like Portland, Maine was first, but nobody
Ah,
knows Portland, Maine
of
exists. It's
course.
yeah, the inverse. We're not quite popular enough to unseat the first president of the United States. So we're
Yeah,
working on it,
absolutely.
but
And may I ask this for American listeners, because they have quite a lot. Whereabouts in Washington State?
Pullman, Washington, to get specific. So Eastern Washington, not far, very close to Idaho, very close to
Okay,
Idaho.
that's sort of like eastern side. Yeah, we came in
Yeah,
from that side into Oregon, and
yeah,
one of the things that surprised us the most that Oregon people's minds, yeah, the coastal road, Cannon Beach, yeah, we get that, and obviously it's there. But if you go right to the other side of the state, coming in from the central bit, it's like desert. Feels
yeah,
like
yeah,
miles and miles of nothingness and
yeah.
quirky towns, I'd say.
Quirky is a very nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay.
They're
Yeah.
very political. Good to know. No, but yeah, I mean, it's that thing like Oregon, same thing. Oregon has some really beautiful territory kind of all the way east, and the gorge is beautiful. There's a lot of really nice things to say about Oregon, and Washington is kind of similar in that you would say that Washington State is a continent in a state because we actually have everything from high desert, like you experienced,
Yeah.
to rainforest out on the
Mm.
peninsula. So there's a
Yeah.
rainforest, there's like multiple mountain ranges, you can go skiing, and then you have volcanic formations. And where I grew up is called the Palouse, which is a very unique formation that is like this ripply. It's a very beautiful rolling hill that you can actually only find in France as well.
Oh, wow.
Pear is here in France, and I not that that's where the name comes from necessarily, but it is a French word. The pelouse,
Mm.
pelouse is like the lawn. So there you go.
Oh, great fact. And the best thing about Washington State is a bit like Oregon, you do have lots of stuff to see, different stuff. So
Yeah.
we came in from the west side through the Olympia National Park, Port
Mm,
Townsend, and stuff like that. You get a little ferry across. It's all
yeah.
very nice and sort of like the islands to the left, like you say, you can go desert to the east. And you've got the mountains in the Mount Baker and stuff like that, right? Sort of
Yeah.
protruding in the middle. So
Well,
it's
it's
an
funny that
unreal
you
state.
that's the thing. It's like Oregon. I think Oregon's coastline is kind of the most majestic of the coastlines, and
Yeah.
then on the west coast at least, and then yeah, Washington. It's just funny because if you go from Seattle, if you take a ferry, you can be so far from civilization so quickly. So if you're an outdoors person, which your listeners can't see the outdoorsy background you have behind you on this call, but I take it you might be. Some amazing forests and I mean, yeah, the wilderness that you can find in Washington State is amazing.
Yeah. And it's very much a bit like BC and Vancouver, very similar
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah. Well, and then you get up to the inlets of BC. I mean, BC also has, speaking of coastline, my goodness, like it's
Mm.
incredible. So you just have to have a boat to see a lot of it.
Yeah, a boat is key. It's what I've learned this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you're based in Paris, you're from America. So I want to first kick off with a question about how did travel come into your life, maybe early doors? Was there some trips? Was there maybe one trip you done yourself in adulthood? Like, was there anything that sparked the wanderlust?
Yeah, I don't know. I never got to travel when I was a kid, and yet I always had the wanderlust. I really wanted to get out and see the world. And there's so many different, I think it was like a lot of books, just seeing posters. I have no idea what planted the seed, but I had both a desire to travel and very much a desire to live in France for some reason. No idea why. But we didn't travel. My family, whether we couldn't afford to or whatever was going on there, like we barely left the state. And so to me, I think a lot of it might have been just that buildup of pressure of having that desire and wanting to get out. And so the first time I ever left the United States, beyond a trip to Canada when I was like 8, I think we went to Vancouver once.
Mm.
But aside from that, I made it to Italy towards the end of college and really enjoyed it. Knew it was the right direction, but my heart was always in Paris. I just didn't know it yet because like I got to France right after when I came and taught English. If your listeners are interested in kind of figuring out how to get their foot in the door for a visa, coming to France, especially when you're younger, right out of college in particular, they have a program called an English assistantship where you can be an English, like a very low level English teacher for like 10 hours a week. They don't pay you very well at all, but it gets you here. And I did that, and I went to Nice because I was like, oh, well, it's in France. And, I had some loose connections there. And it was good for my French, but I looked around and I was just like, I don't, maybe I got this wrong. Like, this doesn't feel like what I was looking for. I don't know. I don't know about this. And on the way back through, I spent a week in Paris and was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I've always wanted. Like, what have I been doing with my life? Like, this is what I'm supposed to be. Um, and so just kind of made it my mission to come back.
Okay, I've got a question for you, a random one. So, being
Go
from
for
the
it.
UK, I lived in London for 4 years at college, university. I don't like it, but I love Paris. Would you find that a bit weird, or can you see why someone would love Paris and not like London, or vice versa?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think for me, I've been spending more time in London recently, and to me, London and Paris are great complements because they're so different. So it's
Right.
not difficult for me to imagine that like London is huge in the same way that like Manhattan is huge.
Mm,
You don't have the same obviously vertical like sense of being completely hemmed in by skyscrapers, but there's a sense of being very small. Yeah, like crowds, you have to go so far to get anywhere. London is very overwhelming in that way, I think, especially
hmm.
for new people. But even if you lived there for 4 years, I think there's something smaller and quaint about Paris where you get a lot of the beauty. You still have access to everything you would want. But like it feels much more walkable. It feels much more accessible. And yeah, I can definitely see how like you might prefer one or the other. That makes total sense to me.
Yeah, I think that it's that community feel. I think you're right there. But about Paris, I can live in one of those districts, I think, and just stay there. I don't need to go out to other ones. I can occasionally go out, but I'd love to live in one of those, get to
Yeah,
know it, go and do local coffee shops. And I find Paris just a little bit more doable on a budget. Maybe that's because I'm
yeah.
a budget traveler from the past, really. But you can go and get like an espresso and a baguette or a croissant for like 2, 3, 4 euros, like a local place in pretty much central Paris. If you don't
Yeah,
go
you
to
can.
tourist areas.
Yeah. Yeah, don't I tend to warn people away from anywhere that's on a corner with a red awning.
Yes, yeah.
It's like the honey trap. It's how, it's how flowers get bees to come in, and it's the same for tourists. But like at the same time, yeah, Paris can be very doable. I think I have found on my trips up once you leave that super budget though, because I don't know, I have when I was in London in 2012, I was very much on a budget. I
Yeah.
don't remember what that was like. But now that I'm fortunate enough to be at a place where I'm kind of like I'll eat street food and coffee shops and, kind of mid-budget stuff. I found that they're very comparable. I don't think that like, especially currently how weak the pound is helps a lot.
Yeah.
Like going and traveling up there, it's pretty crazy how London feels much more accessible than it used to. So I don't know if that's because of the currency or what, but like, yeah, just spending a week up there eating out, it didn't feel like I was spending more than I would in Paris. So
Hmm.
but yeah, I think it just kind of depends because I think rent is probably higher in London. But again, like it feels like you get so much more space. Like the population density is so much lower in London. It just depends on where you end up.
Yeah, and this all goes down to what you think in terms of how you want to live your life. Because I find the French people and the French way of doing things, they do look after you people. An example would be for you, if you like, is I was in Canada, we've got a French part, French Canadian part.
Yeah,
Now, rent in Canada outside of Quebec is extortionate. I'm talking that out of control, but they have proper rent control in Quebec, and it's like
yeah,
very, very reasonable. And France as a country, when we look over from the UK, they protest all the time. They want workers' rights. They want to look after people. And I think it just feels like you could probably get along better there, and they got your sort of rights at heart, if you like.
yeah. I think collectively that's true. I think that individually, it's funny because I've had kind of the opposite observation that I think that's true collectively. Like they do go out, they're going to protest, there's a level of like broader solidarity, but individually, like they're much less likely to kind of step up for you in a way where I
Oh,
think like I had an experience at least when I was coming from, I think it was when I was coming in to Manchester from the airport, and there was a woman that left her luggage at the airport and realized it 20 minutes into the train ride. Like
mm,
we were getting very close to the first stop, and she started to stress out and was very, very upset. And what was remarkable to me about it was that everyone on the train near her like reached out and was kind of saying kind words, trying to comfort her, give her ideas of how she could solve the problem. Like, hey, like here's the number, I found it, give them a call, whatever. And in Paris, no one would do that. Like in Paris, like you would have to be bleeding from at least two separate limbs before anybody's gonna even, most of the time they're just gonna look at you like, oh, okay, and move away from you. And so that's not 100% true, obviously. But I feel like the French, they put so much faith in the state that they're going to protest very hard to get the state to align with their needs. And once that's done, there's not really the same sense of charity that exists in an Anglo culture. So that's definitely that's a big thing that I've noticed, where I definitely feel like going back to the States to me sounds terrifying because I recognize that there's no safety net. And, so there's kind of those two extremes where everybody's much nicer and customer service is so much better in general in the States. And yet, if I get cancer, I won't go bankrupt if I'm in
Yeah.
France. So,
Yeah.
You pick
You win some, you lose some.
whatever you prefer. Yeah,
I would say in UK also that people from the north are nicer. I
that is
think,
the reputation. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that I'm not surprised in Manchester that helped, but in London, I think be like Paris, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's okay. Fair enough. Yeah, that wasn't
No
exactly a
problem.
1-to-1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Manchester was great, by the way. I would love to go back to Manchester. It seemed amazing.
Yeah, Manchester is up and coming, I think. It's always been there. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I think a lot of investment's going in now. And I think they're gonna pour a lot of people up there, and it's gonna get more expensive. So if you want to go to Manchester, go now.
Get up there now. Yeah, the locals that I met, and I stayed with a couple guys, they were both, it was cool. They're really proud of Manchester, but also had a really great case to make for it being the place to be. And it's like, yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, a lot of history, and I just think the people just got a bit of a sense of humor and quite nice.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so you went to Europe, sort of college era of your life. So did that really maybe spark some other travels that you've been to, like other than Paris and maybe Italy?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I've lived in a few different places, and I think that most of it was actually sparked by desperation. Maybe not desperation, but I think, that's the whole idea of like the story of how I got to Paris is kind of driven by this desire to be here more than anywhere, but also ending up in, parts of the world that I really didn't want to be in. So
Right.
I kind of rubber banded between maybe some neutral ground in the middle, but then ending up in places I really didn't want to be. And I think that really fed the fire to be like, I got to figure this out. Like, I know where I want to be. I know exactly where I want to be. How do I get there? So yeah, I mean, there definitely, I think the spark came from early. And then I think after that, it was that very much that hunger. When I moved back after college from Nice, the recession hit shortly after, and, opportunity dried up. The job that I had lined up vanished. And then I was working temp jobs and I was just struggling to make ends meet. And so when I ended up volunteering on a hospital ship in West Africa, which is just about as random as it sounds, I did so largely because I was like, well, I want to use my French. I'd love to have an adventure. I feel like there's no other way I'm going to get to sub-Saharan Africa. And, I always had that belief in volunteering and giving at least a part of your life away. And so I did. But, I wouldn't say that was because of like a very direct desire to go straight there. I think every road was an attempt to get back to Paris. And I just kind of kept running into either roadblocks or massive setbacks along the way.
Yes, that's quite different from like the travel bug, if you like. So your thinking is, I need to live there, I need to move there, and whatever means, wherever that is, gets to that road at the end, I need to go and do that road. Pretty much.
Which is, I was going to make some jokes about like starting drug cartels and stuff to get there, but I don't need that kind of heat. But I think it's that thing of like that's the book. I did write a book about getting to Paris called Sea of the Unknown, and it is which your readers can listen to or read if they want. But I think it details like I tried to really capture that struggle of like knowing you have dreams and wanting to attain something that you really just don't know how to get to and throwing yourself at it anyways. And so I think that ultimately was just kind of a persistence. Like when I look back, I'm very fortunate to have gotten the visa that I got, to have survived some of the stuff I did. And so, yeah, for me, it wasn't the traveler mindset in that sense of like, oh, I want to go see the world, which I did. I definitely have that. And I'm very grateful to have seen as much of the world as I have. But like the central drive was like, no, I just belong in Paris. And that's what got me here.
Interesting. What do you find or make of the way that what I see a lot from my, I don't know, 10 years since I started traveling really is that so many Europeans, which could be like Germans, English, a little bit of French, not too much French, some Spanish, definitely Italians. They love moving to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, maybe a little bit less because it's harder to get here there. But then vice versa, you guys, you want to go to Europe. Like, why do you think there's such a crossover in the same generation of people that want to experience different things? Because from my perspective, I'm fed up with old stuff. I want things to be new, done properly. So I'm like, right, I'm going to Australia, I'm going to New Zealand. I want to check out Canada and see what it's like. But I do yearn a little bit to go back to Europe. But a lot of people do settle in the newer countries. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a great question. I'm curious for you. That's great. Like what I understand that you're craving the new because I think a lot of Americans are craving the old. Like they want to
Yeah,
see a building that's older than our country. You know,
yeah.
they want to see things that feels more substantial and weren't made with corrugated steel and cinder blocks. You know, so I think that there's a craving for history and for like art that's ingrained into the actual like city streets themselves. And I think there's a mystery. I think it depends on where you come from and why. Like they talk about about France because Paris has a particular pull for a lot of Americans. And somebody said once there was part of the mystery that exists for the French is that there was never a major wave of immigration into the United States from France. And
Okay.
as a result, it's maintained a little bit of a distance and a mystery because we don't have as much of it, as much access to it. So I think that there's that for us as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think people, it might be partially that the grass is greener on the other side. Maybe they're just
Mm.
looking for an adventure. And it's never been as easy, with planes and the resources that we have now, the ability to work remotely, to just take your laptop and go, set up shop wherever you want. I don't know. I'm sure there's a ton of different reasons. I see most of the people that I see doing it did it in a much more easy and sensible way than I did it. So I'm definitely
Yeah.
envious, and I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, I think from a personal point of view, uh, I think a lot of Europeans have this class system based, right? Which
Yeah.
does it really is underestimated how society is run, especially in the UK. I think people want to escape that. But I
Mm.
imagine if you like went back 4 or 5 generations and all those like colonizers or whatever you want to call them, just making the trek by sea, it takes months just to start a new life. Yet their descendants, like 3 or 4 generations down, like, nah, I want to leave, go back. It must
Yeah.
be devastating for them if they were to come back.
They're watching from heaven and or hell. And
Yeah.
they're like, why?
Yeah. What are you
Um,
doing? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think I joke about that all the time. It does feel kind of like returning to the home ship, the mothership in a way.
Mm.
Um, but it's funny because I think about this. Like I've applied for French citizenship. I've been here long enough. I paid my taxes. I have done nothing illegal, at least besides getting a ticket on my bike once. And so, I feel at home here. I'm very Parisian in a lot of ways now after spending so much time here. But I do recognize, we were talking about before we started recording, we were talking about my friend Paul who does comedy in
Mm.
French and English, and he sounds perfectly French when he speaks French, and it causes all kinds of really funny problems for him because people think he still makes the same grammatical mistakes,
Hmm.
uh, but it just sounds like he's an idiot. And to the French ear, whereas for me, like when I speak, I clearly I don't sound American, but I don't sound French, so people know, and they're just like, oh, that's cute, like that was a nice try. Um, and at the same time, I know that I'll never feel like fully French, just like
Mm.
he doesn't. And part of that, to go back to your comment on classism, I mean that does come back to the French language. The French language, despite the republicanism and so forth, the French language has been constructed to maintain the class system.
Ah,
The
interesting.
exceptions in the language, the way that you speak it, the way that you write it, especially,
Mm.
um, are all indicators of your level of education. And that's how they
Ah,
can assess you within a few sentences and know, oh, all right, I see where you're coming from. In the UK, it's a lot of its accent, right? A lot of
yeah.
it's the way you present yourself. But with the French, like, it doesn't really matter, like, in the same way with the way that I mean, I'm sure it does to some degree. If you roll up in a Rolls Royce, I guess they're going to know something about you. But if you step out of that Rolls Royce and you make some silly mistakes, they're going to be like, oh, new money. Like they're going to see
Yes.
right through it. Um, so that classes system is definitely very it feels less apparent, I think, to the outsider. But when you live here and you see it, like I have the good fortune of being an outsider and thus being granted some good grace for that because I'm an
Mhm.
American, and they're like, oh, you're a curiosity. But I think that I can see what you mean there too. Like when you come into it here and you're like, okay, like I found my friends and I feel at home here. But there are elements of it that will always make me feel a little bit like an outsider. And I think if I was raised with that, if I was raised in a system where I knew that I would always be marked as not being a member of a particular caste, yeah, I would itch to leave that too. So I get that.
Mm. That's tough, isn't it? I'm always fascinated by the French and the French Canadian relationship. Yeah, I've got a friend who lives in Quebec,
Yeah.
and he is Anglophone, but he's learnt French. He's now fluent in French, but he learnt it in Quebec. And his wife is Quebecois, if you like. And they're saying when they go to Paris, they don't understand her, but they understand him.
Yeah.
And I said to her, like, what is the go with this like relationship between French people and French Quebecans, if you like? And it's a fascinating relationship because they kind of look down on French Quebecans as like, you don't speak our language correctly. It's like a
It's
bastardized
very true.
version.
Very
And I
true.
can't grasp the fact that they don't understand her. I'm like, but if
Well,
American comes to the UK, we understand them. Like, it's hard to grasp.
yeah, but the thing is that the Quebecois, so this is a very tender issue. So to
Okay.
any Quebecois who are listening to me right now, any Canadians at all, I realize I'm an American living in Paris, so I'm aware of that. Please forgive me for any missteps here. But the difference is that the Quebecois, like they maintained an older form of French for a very
Mm.
long time. So a lot of the vocabulary and expressions that they have, tabernacle, like things like that, which I just said pretty badly, but hopefully I offended somebody. Um, the like they have a lot of expressions and ways of saying things that it would be the way that it's been said very often, and this isn't exactly accurate, but it would be like if you came to Canada or America, you came to North America speaking Shakespearean English,
Mm.
people would get lost pretty fast. Like they'd be like, I understand what, why, what, we don't speak like this anymore.
Yeah, fair.
And so there's like this old like settler trapper language that's still there that's very cool. Like they maintain something very special in that. But the funny thing is that then that creates a very cultural clash. And I think it's also, unfortunately, back to what we were talking about with the classism, the
Mm.
French find it very quick and easy to be a little bit dismissive because like, better than you.
Yeah.
And that does cause a lot of problems. I have Quebecois friends here. This is why I'm very aware of how sensitive this topic can be, who do struggle with that a lot because it's the language they grew up with. They grew up
Yeah.
speaking French
Yeah. Yeah.
and they move over here, and then every day is filled with frustration because they struggle to be understood and they have to adapt to something that they thought they were already on the inside of. And I think that can actually be really hurtful for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how many people you know from Quebec in Paris, but I get the impression they just don't move between each other's places either. So we met a random person at a cafe in Tofino, which is far west you can get in Canada, and she's from Montreal. And I said to her, like, why don't you go live in France for a bit? You can speak the language, go and see a culture. She's like, no, 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 no. I said, like, we are taught very much. You don't need to leave. You need to stay here. That's why we're here. Even France, I'm like, same language. No, don't need to go. Like, there's kind of taught you don't need to be anywhere else. This is the place to be. So I found it very interesting that she said that. And it'd be hard for her to go to Paris or somewhere to speak because they just won't understand her or like to understand her.
It's a thing where I mean, even I don't know if you know the band Justice, but I remember they did an amazing documentary uh, that was just following them on their tour. And
Mm.
as I recall, there was no commentary. There was nothing. It was like this just almost found footage documentary. And there was this shot where they were in Quebec. I don't know where they probably Montreal or something, but they were being interviewed before a concert, and they literally couldn't understand half of what they were being asked. And they treated it like a joke. Like they were like,
Mm.
"This is
Mm.
pretty funny."
Yeah.
But you recognize that there's definitely a big difference there, which is unfortunate because like obviously all the Quebecois that I know are amazing. Like they're
Yeah.
such wonderful people. Very passionate, very proud of their culture. And I think that there's so much to be gained from them. It is unfortunate, but it happens across borders all the time. I mean, obviously there's still that tension between the US and Canada a little bit. There's that tension between New Zealand and Australia, between
Mm.
France and Belgium, like between all
Yeah.
these countries where
Yeah.
so you have kind of a bigger, more established culture and then a smaller one that may speak the same language, maybe adjacent, but is distinctly different and feels that contrast. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I wish we could just do away with that. That'd be really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, that'd be really nice, right? Yeah. Okay. And before we crack on with Paris, can I just ask any external countries, not Paris, not USA, maybe exclude Canada a bit as well, where you've traveled to that you actually love visiting
Yeah,
as a pure traveler?
I think I always talk about how much I really enjoyed my time in South Africa, and would always love to go back there. I just came back from Freetown, which was quite the experience to go. That was my first country in West Africa I lived in, and I was really, really keen to go back.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, I mean, the Netherlands are also really nice just from a cultural standpoint. Like it's always really nice to go be surrounded by Dutchies.
Yeah, Holland, I regard them as probably arguably or controversially the most progressive country in Europe. I
They're
think
up there.
they're up there with some of the Scandinavian countries, I reckon. But yeah, I think they're just a country that does things right.
I think that the fun thing about the Dutch, this is my assessment of them. And so when I first really experienced the Dutch, like in close quarters, was when I lived with a bunch of them on that hospital ship that I
Yeah,
volunteered on. And I just remember being so off put at first because just things like, that shirt doesn't look very good on you. Comments like that where you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
where did this come from? Like, what did I do to deserve this? I don't even know you. And so at first I was kind of off put by that, but then I came to realize like that there's a beauty in the honesty and they speak their mind and they weren't doing it to hurt me. They were doing it to just let me know, like, you're making a mistake, right? And there's something that's really appealing in that. And in my, the years of getting to know Dutch people better over time, there's just they're kind of bred with that, right? Like there's
Mm.
very much they're raised to be emotionally healthy in a way that I think is what drives that progressivism. Where like I was raised to either like be angry or hungry or not express any emotion. They were raised to very clearly articulate exactly how they're feeling. So like I'm now getting to the point where like probably a Dutch 9-year-old is at an emotional intelligence scale, like
Yeah,
after years of therapy and really working on myself. So there's an element of like, wow, I really appreciate the Dutch. Like they're not doing everything right. They've got some
no,
problems.
yeah.
And so much of their country is below sea level, which just comes with so many issues. But aside from that, phenomenal.
Yeah, and also I think they're the closest to us in language, right? I believe. I think the Dutch language is very
Ah,
close to English.
I would
That's
not
the
be,
closest
yeah.
one
Is it really?
in Europe. Yeah, so I think, well, I guess worldwide if you do it from that standpoint. So I think they are very much like us. And from where I'm from in Norwich, near Cambridge, that eastern part
Yeah.
is very close to Amsterdam's 30 minutes flight. So I kind of feel like
Amazing.
we have a bit of affinity because just across the water is Holland, and
Yeah.
you can go directly
There,
there. And I just feel like they're one of us, to
there's a
be honest.
lot. I feel like there's a lot in common, and I feel like we love coffee, bicycles, like just like there's not that that's it, but I mean, just like there's
Almost it.
yeah, that's pretty much it. No, I don't know. I've been to a handful of places in the Netherlands, and every time I really do appreciate their approach to a lot of things. Um, so yeah, no, I think that that's pretty high up there. I mean, like there are a lot of places that I've been in the world that I've really enjoyed, lots of cities that I've been to that I've really enjoyed. But like if I had to, like if you kicked me out of Paris tomorrow and I had to live somewhere,
Mm.
and it wasn't London, then it would probably be Amsterdam, or maybe New York. And so Amsterdam's the only one that counts for the rules you set. So I guess
Yeah,
that's
fair
it.
enough. Yeah. I just need to explore more. I've barely been there. I need to go and do more.
That's
But talking
amazing.
of citizenship, if you get that though, right, and the passport, then in theory, you can live anywhere
That
in
is
Europe.
it's in Europe. Yeah. Well, I can live anywhere I want.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's really cool. I think that's also part of the reason that it is such a high. I realized that like the main reason that I want to get my citizenship is because I built a life here and I never want anyone to take it away from me.
Mm.
So, and I've already had to leave twice because my visas ran out and there were no other options.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing. But then there's a part of me that's always wanted to, the thing, I've always said this, and I don't know really how reasonable this is. Like this is a dream that I had when I was a teenager, and then you grow up and you're like, ah. But if I could spend like on a year-long language program where I spent, let's say, 6 months in Paris after getting my citizenship, I spend it getting my German back because I studied German as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved to Germany and spend 6 months in Berlin, let's say, working on my German. And then the next 6 months of that same year in Berlin, I start the next language. So I start learning Italian in
Mm.
German
Yeah.
and then keep flip flopping
Uh-huh.
like that
Yeah.
between countries. I feel like that's like, it's not the quickest way to become a polyglot, but it definitely is
God,
like a really fun way to do it,
that's an unreal way to do it.
Um,
Never thought of that. That'd be awesome.
yeah, so that's
Huh.
something that I'm keeping in there. I think that the reason I wouldn't do it necessarily right now is because this is the first time in my life that I've had like a real sense of community
Mm,
in like I've definitely been a part of great communities. If anybody hears me say that and is like, what? Don't Please don't take offense to that. But I'm in a place where I've never felt like I was home. I've never felt like, oh, I could be here. So that is the tension now of being like, oh, it
mm.
took so much work to get there. I don't want to throw that away. At the same time, it is a city that's very transient, and a number of my closest friends are always on the verge of like moving for a better opportunity. So we'll have to see. I think I mean, as long as Cooper, my dog, is welcome in the country, it'll be
I'm
great.
sure he will
But
be.
we're very spoiled because like France is so dog friendly that like
Yes,
it's
very.
gonna be
Yeah.
very hard to move anywhere else. So
Mm. I can't believe that idea has never come to me actually. But the problem is, as most British people listen right now, I just got their head in the hands because of Brexit, you can't do that very easy anymore.
you're not
Yeah,
European anymore. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
not European, so that makes things a tad easier, and they're all rushing to Ireland to get their passport.
Well, time to
Yeah,
now you know your next destination.
it's just like, oh, I put so much time in Canada to get the passport. I should have gone to Ireland instead. Oh well. Yeah. Oh well. You live and you learn, but that's
Yeah,
a
but you know what?
hard decision.
By land mass, Canada offers so much more.
Indeed, it does. Yeah, it's just bloody cold.
Very true.
Okay, so Paris. I know you touched on you're there, you like the feel, but
Mhm.
what is it about Paris that made you want to stay? Like, is there just the way people are? Is it the way you have your coffee? Is it the way the old streets come together and make this little nice little district? Like, what is it about Paris?
Yeah, maybe number three. Definitely not how people are. That's the number one thing we complain about here.
Okay.
You're not Parisian until you complain about Parisians as a habit, I don't think. But no, Yes, that's a great question. I think honestly, there was just a general vibe to start. Like, there's some, and I think that's something that a lot of people feel. I don't think that I'm the only one. I think a lot of people come here and they're like, "Wow, this place." There's something really magical about it in the streets, in the culture, the cafe culture. Even though the coffee is not, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble too. By default, the coffee here is not good either. But like, it's that thing of they're coming along. Like, I'm very much a specialty coffee drinker. I like my my snooty what'd you call it, hipster coffee. Um, so I skipped past Starbucks, I guess. But um, so many things are changing here. I think there was a vibe, there's a lifestyle. I think the lifestyle is the biggest thing. Like, and it's something that plays out when you see people living. Maybe this is true in London too. When you see people living in the States, New York,
Hmm.
or even just I think the States in general, people are just really busy and they fill their schedule in a way that isn't conducive to actually building relationships.
Yeah.
And very few people stop and ask themselves why they're doing that, I feel like. And it becomes this kind of, it's just, you're just jumping into the rat race so completely. And that's a whole other conversation to have. But the cool thing about life here is that it's very common, depending on the job you have and whatever else. But whenever you have a bit of free time, or even just in the evenings after you get off work, people have a tendency to go post up on a terrace somewhere, something to drink, and even if it's just for an hour, but before they go home or before they go on to whatever their evening plans are, there's just this fluidity to it where people spend more time together, and there's not a rush. So like if you go to a restaurant or a cafe or whatever, you buy one drink, they'll leave you alone for a couple hours. Like they don't
Hmm.
care. Which from a business standpoint drives me nuts. Like it's mind boggling. Like why, where, like how do these places stay open? But from a consumer standpoint, from a customer standpoint, it can be very, very nice to just be like, oh, we are just here and we're going to enjoy what we want to enjoy. And there's no pressure to do any more, to buy any more. And I think that's actually one of the biggest draws, honestly, is the elements of the lifestyle.
Yeah, two things. Okay. So I met Oliver G from the Eiffel Tower podcast in Paris
Yep.
for an interview in a cafe. And the first thing he said, yeah, the coffee here is shit. Is
Yeah.
it? Oh, I've been loving the coffee so far. I couldn't believe he said it. He's Australian. They're great hipster coffee. I get it.
Yeah.
And number two, being in America the last 6 weeks just before I got back to Vancouver, the amount of takeaway coffee places, like how hard is it to find sometimes in not the big cities, I mean, just like small town America, just a normal cafe that serves you a normal cup, not a takeaway cup, to sit
Yeah.
in and have a coffee for half an hour, 45 minutes. People are always driving through. I'm like, this
Yeah.
is pretty, I actually found it pretty sad that people just It has food as well, food and drink. They just drive through and get it and go. I'm like, there's no half an hour to sit down and have a chat. And it's
Yeah.
quite sad, actually.
Yeah, me too. It's not something that I want to go back to. I think that one of those things about being in the States, I think whenever I go back, there was a period where I would get a little bit of culture shock actually going back, especially after I lived in West Africa for a while. And my parents were living in Texas at the time, so I'd fly into East Texas, and that was the biggest culture shock of my life every time I would go from one to the other. And everything you're describing about, like, yeah, the convenience and drive-throughs and everything, it's like it does often feel like everything's ratcheted up to this level of efficiency where you feel like, oh, like I'm saving time and I'm doing this, that, the other
Yeah,
thing. And people forget that we're meant to live a little bit along the way. Like
yeah,
efficiency is great, but like to what end? Like,
yeah, exactly.
and the richest parts of life are the parts that you share with others, where you stop, you slow down, and you actually get to know someone and get to be known. And that's not going to happen through a drive-through window or on Zoom, or not on Zoom, but well, Zoom, yeah. But I was going to say TikTok, like whatever. There's just there, yeah. It's interesting when I go to the States. It feels like there are always higher and higher barriers between people.
Yeah, and I think the only non-barrier you see is probably in the bigger cities. Like I love to go to New York's Manhattan because people are in cafes and they're kind of mingling together like a Paris or London, right? But in the outside of the big ones, yeah, there's an interesting viewpoint I saw from that.
It's hard. Yeah, we've lost. I think they call them third spaces, right? Like that idea that there's a community space, which is the thing that Starbucks capitalized on, where they are very good about leaving you alone, like letting you have some space, meet people, talk to
Yes.
friends, do your
Yeah.
thing. But that used to be community centers or churches or even parks. And Americans are so scared in general right now. It feels like nobody even wants to spend time in a park because it's just
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy to me how I feel like whenever I go back to the States, for one, I feel like everywhere I turn, someone's trying to make a profit off of me. And not just a profit, but they're like trying to ratchet it up to that point of like, what is the most I can get out of you for this? Like, what is the optimal amount of money I can pull out of you? So it kind of stops. It feels like if I were to live there, like you would just get bled dry. Um, and then, yeah, I think the other side of it is there's just something about the distance between people that only keeps growing. And I think there's a long conversation to have about social media and the 24-hour news cycle, but I think that also people are allowing it to happen to themselves, and there needs to be, I don't know, there's definitely a level of effort that can be put in to bridge those gaps, but it's not easy. And if you live in a system that does not encourage it, that actually discourages it, that just makes it so hard. So
Yeah, it's a huge conversation. I don't want to go there too much, but USA for like traveling and seeing things, unreal. The unbelievable amount of different stuff you can see for volcanic stuff, mountains, beaches, whatever you want to see. But then we asked ourselves, "Oh, do you live here?" Absolutely not. I could not deal with the constant. It's like ultra capitalism. I'm not anti-capitalist to say let's not go there, but it is another level there where they do try and get the last dollar out of you, and it's like little things from advertising on the street. So if you watch TV, you can't watch an NBA game without 1 minute going past and there's like another advert. It's just constant, buy this, do this, get this, and it's just grating. And then the final point, like you say, the community aspect, I just found that there wasn't any. And it's quite, pockets were having that, like Cannon Beach, because I'm a nice little community there, and they go on the beach and they get their chairs out and have coffee. But in most places, it's pretty damning.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I think that there's a level of intentionality that you have to put into community that in the past was built into the way that our communities were built, right? Like towns and cities. And it's also that kind of element of charity and so forth that used to be at the core of the American ethos for sure. I can't speak to anyone else, but like I know that growing up volunteering, whether that was at like a soup kitchen or to help somebody build a house or whatever, like I spent so much time as a kid volunteering and being a part of the community, going out and just actively contributing. And I know that in France that's very hard to do. Like there's not a lot of opportunities to do that. And it still exists in the States, I'm sure, but I don't know. It does feel like we've been pushed apart. And yeah, and to be cynical about it, it does feel like it's just because it makes somebody somewhere more money that we're not together.
Yeah, it's a bit polarizing, I think. Probably the most I've seen actually in a lot of countries I've been to, that you can feel it the most. Like it's gone to another level last night. I don't know, is it 5-10 years? I don't know what's happened, but it just seems very polarizing that people are just like, it's them and us, but you're actually the same in the same country, but
100%.
divided so
Well,
much.
and I think it's that thing that like the division, all of it's fabricated for profit, and it's very much like and there are studies that show that like the more anxious, the more sad, the more scared, all these negative emotions, the more that you're held in that, the more you spend, and it is making people a lot more money, and they get your attention, they can advertise to you, whatever, and so there's just a lot of deeply cynical elements to it where you're like, oh yeah, it's not any individual like pulling the strings, it's just the incentives within the system are such that it will drive you there. And yeah, if we don't, it's important to talk about it, because it's that thing where it's like, I think we're all aware of it, and I think it's a conversation that's happening more and more. I have no idea how much that conversation's happening, but then the onus, oh man, it's so hard, because how do you make change when like, for me, like personally, I definitely am off social media as much as possible.
Yeah.
I even ended up getting off Twitter. I don't look at the news. Like I'm stay up to date through slower news sources if I can. Like I want to read about it later.
Yeah.
My emotional and mental health has only benefited from that. And and I have friends that are we have conversations about it all the time. I have one friend in particular who she's very, very on Twitter and very, very tuned in. And there will be multiple times in the week where I will have to ask her, like, so like, have you thought about just turning Twitter off? Like, there's, I have those problems that you are so aware of right now come within 5,000 miles of you, because I'm pretty sure that only affects you because you're letting someone inject it in your brain.
Yeah.
There are bigger things, there are trends, there are things. Obviously, we need to be informed, and I'm not arguing against remaining informed. That's the bedrock of democracy. But all the channels we used to rely on to inform us are unfortunately giving way to all those incentives as well. So it's a tricky time, man. We're all renegotiating our trust in institutions and each other, and it's really unfortunate, because it's basically we've been I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but we've been picked apart for parts. We've been picked apart for parts and then sold off, and you can feel it.
Yeah. I think I complained to my girlfriend and I said, why can't we just like watch or have something that's just not extremities? Why is it always that far left or that far right or whatever? Like, why can't we just have something that's normal in the middle? And I think
because then both sides will be angry at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said the only site, and people disagree with this and they might complain, the only site that I get my news from, because I think it's the most central, is BBC, because they are publicly owned, and they have a rule, if you like, a law not to be biased on one side. Because I'm just fed up. America is the worst for it, but I'm fed up. Just like you go into a motel and you put the new like Fox 10.
I was gonna say North Korea might be one step worse, but America's pretty bad.
Yeah. So anyway, back to Paris, back to better things. Can you speak French?
I can.
How fluid are you now?
I've never tested to see like legally how fluent I am, but if your listeners are familiar with the European language system, I'm C1 to C2. I'm probably I would say I'm C1 comfortably. So that would be like I'm fluent, but you would not mistake me for a native speaker.
Can you make jokes?
Oh yeah.
Oh, but that's the height, isn't it? As long as you make jokes in the language,
it doesn't guarantee they're funny, but I could definitely make jokes.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Actually, a few years ago, I had a friend that we were just talking about this the other day. She's proud of me for sticking with this, because 2 years ago, I made it my goal to make French service staff laugh.
Okay, right.
Which is a high mountain to climb, but I was like,
yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
I was like, hey man, if I can get this past like dumb luck and get to a point where I'm always like able to win them over and make them laugh, then I'll really feel like I speak French. And it was brutal at first. It was definitely a best 50-50. Like it was not like so many jokes that did not translate, did not make sense. And a lot of that is because humor, people will say like, oh, this culture or that culture doesn't have good sense of humor, which I mean, maybe that's true, but maybe we could talk about Germans some other time. But aside from that, I feel like everybody universally has like jokes. Humans, like there's so much humor that transcends language. And then within language, once you understand, you're like, oh, these are the same jokes we would make. I just don't know how to structure it properly or to use the right words or whatever. And so much of it, I felt like it wasn't translating it like word for word. It was really finding the art of saying like, oh, they just wouldn't say it that way. And then finding the right way of saying it, which was often very painful. So yeah,
Mm.
I put in my reps. I'm not gonna say I'm like doing stand-up comedy anytime soon, but
I think it's
I'm not
key though.
totally boring.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
think it's key because you have a YouTube channel, right? So I have a podcast, and I think, well, my big aim next year, as you know, apart from the podcast and my own YouTube and trying to set up, I want to do like a writing class for like joke, a comedy class.
yeah,
I don't want to be like, I don't know, Ricky Gervais or anything, but I think yeah, if I can do like a 5 minute set next year, like at the end of the
yeah.
year, that's a good goal. But I think it helps things like this, YouTube, and just makes it
Oh yeah,
a bit lighter, right? Because going to the previous conversation is a bit depressing about that sort of stuff. You just need to maybe share some laughs and have a joke, I think.
100%. No, that's and I think I respect stand-up comedians so much, and I'm lucky to have some as friends and watch them do their thing. And I mean, man, what a grind. But I think it's that thing too. It is valuable because it teaches you so much about also reading a room,
Yeah.
understanding what works, what doesn't, why. And I think for one, it teaches you too. Sometimes it's not you. You can deliver really good material that works in every other room, but it might not work in a room because they just kind of suck. Like
Yeah,
maybe they don't
yeah.
get it. Maybe it's just cold, maybe whatever. So at the same time, like it also, I think, if you can take the beating that it initially delivers pretty much everyone, then you're going to come out the other side a much better communicator, stronger, and just a hardier human being with a few scars to show for it.
All about rejection. Can you take rejection? I definitely can. I've had a lot of it. So
There you go. Then you're
yeah.
ready.
So you're ready. Like if you think, it could be anything from asking to go out on a date or doing a joke, whatever. If you can accept that they're going to say no or not laugh at you, that's all right. But a lot of people can't accept that, so they don't put themselves out there.
100%. That's
Yeah.
actually really good. That's like a good bedrock thing to take from it, right? Like if you struggle with rejection, maybe time to throw yourself into a situation where you're going to get rejected so you can learn to deal with it.
Otherwise, you won't do anything, right? You just sit there
Yeah,
and I don't know.
exactly.
Be fuck cool. Okay. Paris questions. Got maybe some favorite districts that you like hanging out in.
Yeah, I mean, I generally am going to be a favorite of the canal or the back half of Montmartre personally. So I mean, all of Montmartre in general is great. There are some areas that just get too crowded, but
Yeah.
then the canal, if your listeners are familiar with Canal Saint-Martin, which is the canal that runs north of the Seine, uh, it is just where all the good food is at. So like if you want to be, I mean, I know there are left bank stands out there. I'm going to get myself in trouble with the people that are hardcore left bank, but the best bars, food, coffee, everything that's happening is happening on the right bank, and it's going to be in the northeast.
Okay. And what is the most underrated tourist spot? This is a patron shout out to Laura from the Swamp Soup Stickers, who has contributed £5 to the podcast on my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it, and it helps the podcast to keep going in the future. If you're interested, head to the show notes where you'll find a link to my Patreon. The website address is patreon.com/Winging It Travel Podcast. For £5 you will receive some trendy stickers from myself in the post, a shout out on each episode, and also my digital travel planner by email. Thank you for your support.
Most underrated thing in Paris, I think, well, it's my favorite museum in the city is one that most people don't know about. And part of that's because it was closed for the last 5 years. It's been reopened now for maybe 2 years, but it was closed for the first 5 years of my time here. And it's the Carnavalet. And the Carnavalet Museum is the museum of Paris. So it's filled with
Oh,
artifacts
wow.
from prehistory all the way to modernity.
Yeah.
And right now they have on display, they have the ceremonial vase or a ceremonial vase from the 1924 Olympics. So it's a
Wow.
centennial
Mm.
um, artifact, I guess you'd say. But the whole thing is really wonderfully put out. They are laid out. They did a really good job of renovating the whole space. And so as you go through, there's lots of tactile stuff to do for kids. There's a lot of stuff for those that are impaired, like sight impaired. So there's a lot of braille and ways of engaging with the environment and the what would you call it, the displays. And then just the whole thing is amazing. Like if you are a fan of Paris at all and you like history, you have to go, and it's free. So
Oh,
there's like, I mean, double win.
win squared.
Yeah, and it's basically it's in the Marais. It's in the third, but it's in the Marais. So everybody wants to go to the Marais to walk around anyways. and you're probably going to end up there. So it's going to be very convenient.
Great little area, that. Yeah, I love that. Okay, you mentioned Paris controversially has crap coffee, but can you name somewhere that's decent coffee?
Oh, of course I can. I can rattle off dozens of good places.
Maybe five. Maybe five you can rattle
Yeah. No,
off.
it's that thing where in the past, and to be fair, like I think again, it depends on what your standards are for coffee, but like if the Australians listening will appreciate this, but um it's that thing of like the cafe culture is what's great about Paris and the
Yeah.
ability to sit and just enjoy it and whatever. But they will serve you like what they generally will serve you is going to be the equivalent of an espresso. And if you're fine with that, then great. Just set expectations. Then you can take my comments about it being crap and you can throw them in the garbage. Clearly, I don't know you and I'm not made for you. But if you are a fan of a good flat white or like a filtered coffee or something that's you want to taste the coffee and you don't want it to taste like ash, then my number one spot to go would definitely be Motors. Motors, there's a bunch of great places, but Motors is really, really good because it's very central. It's in the first arrondissement, easy to find near Châtelet, or Châtelet, or I always say it wrong, and now somebody's gonna make a comment. Anyways, um, Motors, they just do a very, very good job of being very consistent. They have very interesting beans on offer all the
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
Usually they'll have options between different types of beans for both filter and espresso. And then their in-house pastries are amazing.
Oh,
And they also bring in donuts from the only donut shop in Paris, which is also a vegan donut shop. So you can win 3 times over there.
there's only one donut shop in Paris?
There's, well, as far as where I would go, yeah.
Oh,
You can
okay.
you can get donuts at any train station in Paris, but you're going to
Yeah.
regret it.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Because I have a YouTube channel for coffee only, just specifically coffee.
Okay.
And I
Yep.
think I'm just finding very quickly. I had 3 in Paris that I thought was
Okay.
worth recording. I met Oliver G at a cafe called Le Peloton. I don't know if
Yep.
you know that.
I do know
He
it,
said
yeah.
they did decent coffee, so we sat there and
Yep.
had the coffee and recorded. But okay, yeah, one's touristy. Anyway, I went to I went to a place called Le Comptoir de San
Oh, yeah.
Poli. It's right in the middle of probably a tourist area, but Le
No, but that sounds
Comptoir
really familiar.
San
Okay,
Poli.
yeah. You'll have
I
to
don't
send
know.
it to me. There are a few places named the Comptoir, but I don't know. I don't know that rings a bell. So maybe I'll have to check it out.
Oh, okay. And I had one which was absolutely decent called Valentine Cafe. But this is one we found just like walking down to the Seine, went down a random street. Oh,
Yeah.
cafe there. Served proper coffee, not espresso. Baguette for like €1.50. Unreal.
Amazing. With baguettes too.
Yeah, that's just one of the things we found. Like, oh yeah, there's a baguette there, there's a baguette there. It's unreal.
But
Yeah,
I
just
think that's the joy of it. Like for me, like I do obviously make lots and lots of recommendations for having a good time in Paris and for the people that are going to travel like I would travel. But I think that one of the things that I tried to emphasize a lot is that as much as I would love people to buy my guide and support what I'm doing, at the same time, one of the best parts about Paris is the exploring and
yes,
exactly what you just described, which is like one of my favorite things is either you see the Seine, you know where it is, and you're going to walk towards it, and then as you're going, you're like, oh, what's that spire? And so then you kind of deviate, and
yeah,
then you're like, oh, that smells good. What's that? And you're like, oh, okay, and like so you try something, and you find yourself wandering through the city in a way that like can be very, very pleasant. It can be very slow. It can be fast, but you can discover a lot. That's kind of how I got to know the city so well was I would just let myself go. And that's how I found every place that I recommend. I mean, obviously that people have told me about places that I've gone to and loved, but by and large, they're places that I just found because I was wandering around and the aesthetic attracted me and I tried it and I was like, oh, this is really good. And I think that that's something that anybody coming to Paris should invest some real time and effort into because if you just go to where everybody goes and if you just follow the crowds, that's fine. If it's your first time coming to Paris, like a lot of times you just want to get it out of your system. So just go to all the touristy spots, hit them all, and then come back to Paris and do it more slowly later. But if you can, I would highly encourage just like picking a random small street and be like, well, let's just walk down this and then seeing where it takes you.
that's my mantra for most places. But I think the best place in the world to do that is Paris.
Yeah,
Just
it's
don't
very up
just
there.
don't plan it. Just go and walk. Take left and right down little streets. Oh, it's a dream. It really is a
It
dream.
is. It's amazing.
And one last coffee shop was called The Coffee. I think they're
Oh
Japanese.
yeah, the coffee's very good. Yeah, and they just
Yeah,
opened a
okay.
second location recently. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I went to the one in Le Marais, I think.
yeah, that was their first one. It's a good
Yeah,
one.
very trendy inside, very chic.
very chic, very nice, clean lines, very photogenic, and you even
Yes.
order on a tablet. It's so technologically
Yeah, you don't
forward.
need to speak to a human being. It's unreal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what we've got here. You kind of talked about this already. I don't know if it's worth asking again, but being an Anglophone in Paris, traditionally, you speak French, obviously, but you do recognize that people recognize that you're not local, right? You're not native.
Oh,
It is
totally.
it is that obvious. And but can that be a
Nobody
good thing?
knows until I speak. I mean, like it depends. I get asked for directions by people all the time, so I definitely
Yeah.
blend in. But on the other side, yeah, I mean, like when I talk to people, yeah, my accent gives me away right away. They don't know that I'm American. They'll often
Ah,
assume that
okay.
I'm,
Yeah.
and it changes. Like it used to be, people thought my accent used to be maybe more German continental, and now it's more English. People think I'm English a lot of the time.
Hmm.
Um, and I have no problem pronouncing anything in the French language. Like if you give me the test, I will pass it. But like all my habits are so formed that I think it would require some real re-education to get me to properly speak French. It's within my capacity, and I probably should do it, but I don't feel motivated because they love my accent, and
Ah, okay.
it gets me a lot of charm points, and it also helps to erase a lot of mistakes. Um,
Mm.
is if I do something a little bit that's a little bit of a faux pas, or if I misgender a food item, nobody's jumping down my throat. They just think it's cute, and then they move on.
And for anyone going to Paris who doesn't speak any French, you would advise, especially for Paris, to learn a few words, right?
Yeah, I think the one that I always say is it sounds so basic, but it's really important is bonjour. Like just being able to say
Yes.
hello. You don't have to say it well. You say bonjour, it's fine. But it is the key to having a good time in Paris because traditionally, like restaurants especially, but a lot of businesses pretty much double as someone's home. They might live in the space above the shop. You might literally be walking into someone's home where they're cooking, and that kind of sense and tradition is carried on. So when you walk in, you always want to say hello. It's just polite,
Mm.
and you're kind of announcing yourself. And if you don't do that, you will see a difference in how people treat you. And so if you find yourself being like treated a little bit off, like coldly, if people are off put, if they're not really, I'm not guaranteeing Parisian service is going to be warm, but if you feel like there's a consistency there, it might be that you're not saying bonjour, and you will definitely notice a difference when you do.
Yeah, I know 5 words: bonjour, ça va, je m'appelle, pretty much about it. But the bonjour, ça va, even though I was scared of the response because they're going to ask me a question, I'm not going to know what they're going to say. I think
Yeah,
you're right. It does get you in just a little bit because then if you make a mistake or you don't know the word, they're like, oh, okay, you said hello.
yeah,
Fine.
exactly. You
So
said hello.
bonjour, ça
That's all.
va. Yeah. Okay.
That's all that matters. And I mean, you can go as far as you want with that, but I mean, like, it's hard. Like, if you're traveling to any new country, it's really hard to maintain the words in your brain of any new language. So for me, I guess it's that thing. It's like I don't hold it against anybody if they don't. I think it's just it's just how you behave. So as long as you're gracious and you try, you make that effort, and you don't just assume that they speak English. It's gonna go very far in your favor. The French, I think, especially in Paris, like it's changed a lot. Like people speak a lot more English here than they used to.
Yeah.
When I first lived here 11 years ago now, wow. People speaking English was a much different game than it is now. And now people are really welcoming, and a lot of times you find people really want to speak English, and so that you might have the opposite problem. If you want to practice your French, they might
Mm.
want to practice their English, and you might end up being disappointed because they are insistent in speaking English, and you're like, but I wanted to speak French. And so I guess then the second tip would be like, I know it's disappointing, but maybe don't be too offended if you can help it if they don't want to speak French with you, because it has taken so long for them to come around to the idea that they could speak English. Like, let's just encourage it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
just go for it. Just speak English with them. We'll appreciate it so much.
And if people don't want to hear English, just go to Quebec City. They won't speak English
There
to
you
you.
go. Exactly. There you
Yeah.
go. And
It
I
might be
mean
different French, but
well, if you really want to immerse yourself, you got to get out of Paris. Like there's no I
yes.
know people that have lived here for a long time who still don't speak French. So it's
Oh
very
wow,
possible
really?
to just,
Oh,
yeah, you could live your life here and not learn, a lick of the language. So
that can't happen in my book.
I'm not saying I approve of it. I'm just saying it's possible.
I just think you have to, otherwise, you're just never in it.
Well, and the thing is that like your life, I cannot imagine it just because life here it's really challenging. It's already really challenging to move to a new place. And it is hard to speak a new language. But if you don't speak French, living in France, especially, I don't know about especially in Paris, but just in general, you've already taken a country that generally turns life onto hard mode for everyone, and you've managed to find a harder mode to play it on.
Yeah.
So like I would definitely be trying to move that down to at least a medium, and speaking French is going to be the first step to that for sure.
Yeah, I think any language you want to learn, no, any country you want to go to, don't speak English. You've got to learn the language. My one aim in the next few years is I'm going to dump myself probably in South America somewhere for like
Yeah,
3 months and just learn Spanish and not make an effort. I'm going to go there and learn it. I'm going to get involved. I can
great.
speak basic Spanish is like very basic, but I can get in there, not be afraid. I'm going to learn it. But I think that's the only way. But if you're going to move to a country that's long term, you're not learning language, I don't understand. That's like having a wife or a husband who speaks another language, but you're not going to learn it because you can't be bothered. That's no point, because your kids are going to speak to the other half in a language you don't understand, probably saying stuff about you.
That happens so often though. And shockingly how often they actually, well, and that's a very like American thing, where like a lot of times I have a lot of friends whose parents refuse to speak their native language with their kids because they're like, no, you need to speak English. And that's also a tragedy, right? Where it's like, no,
Baffling.
but they're gonna speak English, don't worry about
Mm,
that. Like, so yeah, no, I don't know. I get it in the sense that it can be a lot, and it depends on why you're in a place, and and what you're doing there, because there are varieties of immersion, and some people are much
mm,
more deeply immersed in a place than others. And I think that, a place like Paris affords people who don't want to or can't really get as immersed to still do it. And so in that way, it's like that kind of works. And I get it, but I agree with you that like it's like your gym coach telling you you're only cheating yourself. Like if
mm.
you don't have to do those sit-ups, nobody cares, but like you're only cheating yourself. And it's the same thing, like if you live in a place and you don't speak the language, you're only cheating yourself. And that's not entirely true, because who knows how many friends you could have made and how much
Yeah.
richness you could have brought to other people's lives if you just learned how to communicate with.
And imagine having French where you can go to like lots of Africa and bits of Central America, South America, and speak the language and be there and doing it. But
Yeah.
it's not like a single language like German where no one's going to speak it and it's pointless. Sorry, James.
Or
But
Dutch, like you
French,
said. Yeah,
yeah, old Dutch, yeah, but French language is definitely one to learn.
it's a useful one.
Yeah. Okay, a few more questions about Paris before we get to YouTube. You did have an ordeal staying in Paris, right? There was and I think it's in your book, but there's a absolute succession of arriving in France, Paris, visas ending, coming out, going back in.
Yeah.
How long did that process take where you can finally say, "Oh, I can just stay normally now, and not worry about that"?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, if you go back to like when I first lived in France, it basically took me a decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is that because you're on the wrong visa, or just because I saw somewhere that you had a bit of trouble with the visa and the job fell through?
Oh
Or
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
no. Well, a lot of things. I think like with I mean, probably the biggest thing was the visa. I mean, not that was not the biggest thing. Was not the visa. The visa was definitely a big technicality. Like coming on a visa that was limited and that I knew I was going to have to leave. Like that was poor planning. I mean, or well, and also just maybe I wasn't aware of any other opportunities. But I also, I didn't have any money, and I was struggling just to make it, and I was struggling to figure out how to do all of that. So I think a big part of it was just struggling to make ends meet long enough to be able to afford to make the jump. And then when I did finally make the jump, I could not afford it, but I also couldn't afford to stay where I was. Like I was going
mm,
insane. So I just took a really, really big risk. I actually went bankrupt shortly after I moved here. I went back in the States, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. It was really, really beneficial. But in that way, like I ended up starting completely from scratch when I moved here. Like I was lucky enough to have this room that you can see behind me to stay in for free, thanks to the mother-in-law of a doctor I worked with in West Africa. And
yeah,
so she let me stay here on a temporary basis at first, and then she was like won over and was like, "No, you can stay." Um, Very, very generous of her. But aside from that, like the job that I had lined up here, like was 6 months delayed. All the projects I've been working on had failed. I was vlogging daily at that time, so I was making a video every day. And that
oh
was
wow,
kind of what I was doing creatively to stay sane. But I didn't even I had maybe at that point, maybe 500 subscribers, maybe
mm-hmm.
600, so I was just struggling to make something happen. And got very lucky with the visa that I got and the fact that I could start over here.
Okay. And one random question. I don't know if you're into sports, but have you got into French sports like football or rugby?
Not really. I've gone
No.
to I definitely yeah, I just also ignited a fire somewhere. Yeah, not really. I've definitely gone to a variety of sporting events, which is cool. I did get to see France beat the All Blacks last year, so that was
Oh
pretty
yeah,
amazing.
great game. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. So that was my first rugby game in person. And I was like, well, I can never go to rugby again. Like
That is
I've
almost a pinnacle. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say I've seen miracles happen. I can't do this now. So no, I haven't gotten particularly into French sports.
Okay.
But I will say that said, tournament time, like the World Cup, is fun, and I really, really enjoy that. So I do enjoy the environment.
Yeah, because they had the World Cup last year, lost the final. Well, this year. Well,
Yeah,
I can't remember now. Must
I
have been
know it was
late last year.
I was yeah, I think it was in the summer, right? Because it was
At
wait, no, was it last year?
the winter.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
Christmas. That's right.
Christmas
Yeah,
time,
I
be a
was in
weird time. Yeah.
California watching it from a hotel lobby by myself, being sad. So I was actually very, very into that. Like I was up at 5 in the morning or whatever to watch France win and then lose. And yeah, it was sad.
Yeah, I was stuck on a Greek island because the weather went bad. Basically, same hotel room watching it on TV, but great game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, YouTube channel. So listeners can search Jay Swanson in YouTube, and I
Yep.
did, and obviously you come up pretty easily. 90,000 followers, pretty much you've got.
Yeah, it's getting up there.
That's a heck of a journey from being, like you said, you mentioned previously about being 500-600 doing daily vlogs.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a journey. So do you now release every week, every month, and what sort of content are you releasing on there?
Yeah, so I've kind of gone through a bit of a transformation when I was daily vlogging for over 3 years, and then have spent a lot of the time after that really trying to figure out where I'm at, what I'm doing, and I'm just getting back to it. Like I finally feel like I'm figuring it out. And I'm about to start vlogging again.
Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5, or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, so at this point, I'm basically launching back into vlogging. I spent the last year focused on Paris tourism stuff because,
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of demand for that, lots of questions, and I have a comprehensive guide that's, when it was a PDF, I think it was 150 pages long, just filled with essays on what to do, like how to get around everything you needed to know, plus a few hundred recommendations, like we're talking about, that are like places I actually like. And so we've been converting that into an online version that eventually will evolve into other things, but just trying to make the experience that much better for people. But at the end of the day, like that, like that can only really go so far. You can only make so many videos about how to use the bus in Paris before
Yeah.
like both people know and also you're gonna go insane. And what I've loved most about YouTube really has been sharing my life and the journey that I'm on. So that's kind of what I'm getting back into more right now. I'm going to be uploading. Don't hold me to this because I'm still working through it to make sure for sure. But I think I'm going to upload about 3 times a month, and I'm going to hold myself to like a real exercise in getting better at telling stories. Like I'm not a bad storyteller, but like I have a lot to learn and grow. And I think that in my journey, I've tried skipping a lot of steps, and I don't think that that did me any favors. So I kind of want to go back and just be like, okay, I want to kind of go back to basics. Like I think I have a little bit of my own style, a little bit of my own whatever I can bring to this. However, I don't want to be precious about it. I don't want to have an ego. Like I want to go steal. Like I want to go find stuff that I love, and I don't want to steal from it liberally. And I want to do the shots and make the things and like learn from people that have done amazing things that I respect. And really exercise that muscle in a different way. So as you could probably tell from our conversation, like I have lived a life. Like I have been around. I have fallen flat on my face many times. I have a lot that I could offer at least to people that are right behind me, that are, that are following behind, and maybe I'm not going to be a guru to the greats,
Yeah.
but like, I think my goal right now is to kind of turn around and be like, okay, well, where are the people that are on a similar life journey? I mean, we're all on a very similar, like, none of us are all that special or unique. We're all very special and unique, but we all have so much in common. How do I pull from the things that I've gone through and the things that I've healed from and give that back? So I'm kind of trying to figure out, okay, how do I engage with my audience in a way that like supports and encourages and, just, I don't know. I just want to make sure that people know they're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's great. And also, is that going to be just specific on Paris, or maybe a bit more branching out?
No, I think it's gonna be back to me. I think like
Mhm.
when I was vlogging daily, it was all about me.
Yeah.
Paris was a backdrop, and occasionally I'd make a video about Paris, and that's kind of what I'm gonna go back to, where there'll definitely be videos in there about Paris. Like if I come
Mm.
up with something that I think is actually fun and interesting,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, but Paris is the backdrop, so lots of opportunities to share Paris. But I think that like there's a very limited audience for Paris. Like it's a very big audience, but it
Mm.
it is like with the tourist stuff, people coming through, they're coming to find a couple good coffee shops for their trip, and then they're going to carry on. And I think the coolest thing is like Patreon is what made it possible for me to go, and not Patreon, my patrons specifically, the people that
Yeah.
support me are the ones that made it possible for me to do this as a living at the beginning. And they're the ones that came for Paris but stayed for me. And they say it that way all the time. Like
Oh
they
wow.
came for, these tips or these tricks or whatever, but in the end they wanted to see where I ended up. They wanted to see my story and they wanted to be a part of it. And I think that's been such a rich relationship. Obviously, as a creator, I'm sure you feel this with your podcast and you will feel this with your YouTube channel. Like you can't have a one-on-one relationship with everybody in your audience, but you develop a strong relationship with them as a collective. I
Mm.
used to call it, but the amorphous blob is what I used to when I was daily blobbing, daily vlogging. When I was daily vlogging, I would talk about like, the amorphous blob. Like there's this, I would put out a video and then the blob would respond. And that it sounds, now that I say that, I don't mean that in a bad way at all. It just kind of in my brain, I just saw this cloud of people and points at which there was connection, and collectively they would, continue a conversation with me.
Mm.
And I think that that's something that's really, really special that I have definitely lost a little bit of, and I want to get back to. And making Paris content doesn't engender that. Making
Ah,
Paris
okay.
content for its own sake is useful, and I'm going to continue to support that and make sure that people have a great time when they come to Paris. My guide is amazing for that. We'll continue to make some more videos, but if I've already got like 30, 40 videos up about Paris, like there's a lot out there. Like I could probably make most of my videos about like connecting with people again.
Okay. Yeah, I think people can buy your guide. I've got a special little link and
You do
a
actually. We give you a
code. Yeah.
discount code, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
discount code. So people can go to the show notes and just click that and access some money off for Jay's guide about Paris because it looks absolutely extensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the same journey as where you were maybe quite long, a few years ago. I'm just figuring out where am I going with this YouTube, but I do want to do it. I find it very interesting, and yet the only thing I have is 3 years of podcasting.
That's a
That's not
lot, dude.
a lot.
That's
Yeah,
not
it's a
only,
lot, and
yeah.
it's weekly as well. Yeah, I'm not putting that down, but I do have like 10 years of travel. I'm like, oh, how can I immerse that into? Because
Yeah.
10 years ago, traveling is very different to now. But I'm sure there's a way I can bring in the content I took and made then, like videos and
Yeah.
photos, and make it into like an immersive YouTube now. But oh yeah, I traveled here. More storytelling, like you said. That's why I want to do the comedy class and go back to basics.
Yeah.
You're right. I want to go and learn. Yeah, how do you tell a story that's funny? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
Well,
next phase really.
the book that I referenced this in my last video, and actually I just trashed a video because I was like, I have to get back to basics. And the video before that, the book, the book Steal Like an Artist.
I don't know.
Okay, so the author Austin Kleon, I'm saying his name wrong. One of these days I'm gonna meet him someday, and he's gonna be like, "You've been saying my name
Yeah.
wrong for years." Kleon, or yeah, let's say Kleon. His book Show Your Work is the one that I picked up when I was in London,
Okay.
and it was exactly what I needed, like right time, right place. Where at the very beginning, he admonishes you to be an amateur, like to go back to being. I don't know if he says go back to it, but he said you need to be an amateur. And what he
Yeah.
means by that is like you need to do it for the love of it. You need to give no craps if you succeed or fail. Like be ridiculous in public, have fun, just do what you're doing for the love of it.
Yeah.
Is the very first like step in that book, and it really spoke to me because for me, when I went from YouTubing as a thing where I was making or vlogging as a thing, and I was trying to tell the story of my life as my life fell apart. Not what I was hoping I was going to be telling as a story.
Yeah.
Um, and then suddenly the YouTube side became my job. Um, I lost a lot of sense of purpose because YouTube, like making those videos was never supposed to be the main thing. Like it was supposed to be about the main thing.
Yeah.
And so when it became the main thing, I really lost my North Star. I lost my sense of direction. And it's been years that I've been wandering, lost. And now that I'm feeling like, oh, I'm figuring this out, like I'm getting back to like I've always wanted to make movies. Like I wrote, 10 fantasy sci-fi books. I've like that those are the stories that I want to bring to life. And that's ultimately the core of why I like filmmaking. Now it's like, okay, now like as I get clarity of the future that I really want, that's how it's like working backwards. Like, what do I need to do to get there? And the core, or maybe the foundational element of that is what we're talking about is like, I need to fall in love with making these things again. Like, I need to just have fun.
Yeah.
And I need to go back to basics. Like, I need to be like, okay, I've been too proud my whole life to accept the fact that I need to learn just like everybody else. And I need to take responsibility for that. And I need to just go back and steal like an artist. And that's literally the first video I'm going to make coming back is my plan is to make a video about stealing like an artist and just straight up steal some sequences from people that I respect, pay them homage, obviously, and talk about it. But I just want to go back and be like, I was literally storyboarding a 30-second sequence where I was just watching on YouTube, pause, drawing out exactly what was there, next pause, and just sketching it out so it's in my brain. Probably definitely not the most efficient way of doing it. I should just do screenshots.
Yeah.
But but that exercise of like trying to immerse yourself in it and understand what this person really created, then recreate it. It's the same thing as like some of my favorite authors who, went back and they typed out by hand some of their favorite books, word for word, right?
Wow. Yeah.
To get into that flow, to feel it. That's the kind of stuff that I used to look at and be like, no way, I'm way beyond that. I don't need that, And now I'm like, why don't I need that? If I can't replicate literally anything anyone else can do, and I haven't done what they've done, I'm not looking to plagiarize anything, but I want to. I keep coming back to Picasso, which is a risky person to come back to. But like when you look at his work and everything he could do, and then he moved on into new things that no one had ever done before, it's because he could do everything that everyone else could do.
Yeah.
Like he spent his time to master it, and then what is left to do but something that is new. And until you get there, yeah, like you're not, I don't know. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I need to eat a little bit of humble pie and be like, hey, I'm obviously not starting from nothing, thankfully, but like at the same time, I want to treat it like I am.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same position actually. Yeah, because people ask like, "Oh, how do you start a podcast?" Well, I just bought a microphone.
Yeah,
there's no science. There's no science behind it. It's just I'll start it one day, and I didn't even have a laptop. So you can always start things. I think it's important to start things. But I think you're right. You come to that journey. I'm 3 years down the line now, and if I'm honest, right now, maybe because of this year's been a lot of travel, but I need to progress. I need to do something better or something new, and that requires me learning something. So for me, that is like, okay, I want to be in creator mode. I've done a year traveling. I've got a heck of a lot of countries and stories. Let's try and create something on YouTube, and I'm looking forward to like getting down and creating it out and get it out there. And I think if you love doing that, the process, then surely that's the main thing. It's got to be. You can't go in like, no, I want to get like, I don't know, 100,000 subscribers and make money. I think that's a byproduct. You got to love it first and like what you put out. And it's not always going to be successful.
No, and well, I mean, it's going to suck at first. I think it's that Anne Lamott. I guess there's an older quote than this, which just came up in a conversation. But Anne Lamott, her famous chapter called "Shitty First Drafts" when she on writing, and Mr. Beast very famously, says that you got to make 100 videos and work on improving something different in every video. And then when you get to 101, then we can talk, then maybe things are going to start. And with that, there are exceptions to that. There are a couple channels I can think of that came out of the gate, like firing on all cylinders, but it's because they had a decade of like filmmaking expertise behind them already.
Yeah.
And so we look at that. It's the kind of that whole thing of like overnight success. It's a myth, right? You look at the people that come out of the gates Or for all you know, they just didn't exist in your awareness until suddenly they're a worldwide success. And you think, well, those guys just succeeded overnight. They dropped out of college and then they turned, whatever. And the survivorship bias of that poisons us to the reality that like you have to believe in yourself more than anyone else. You have to love what you're doing, and you have to be willing to put in 7 to 10 years before you see any, big results. But the real result is ultimately going to be that you're going to change. Like you're going to grow, you're going to learn so much. And like if you can take pleasure in the journey, it sounds so cheesy, but it's really true. Like if you can just enjoy what you're doing for its own sake, then you actually stand a chance. It's the people that get into it thinking, I'm going to be rich and famous, like you're saying. Yeah, no, it's not how it works.
But people can't accept that. And I think people know that it takes 7 to 10 years, right? I've fully accepted it. I've started YouTube in the summer. Yeah, I don't expect a month down the line. Oh yeah, I know it's going to be like 5-10 years. So in my mind, I'm like, it's okay. It's going to take a long time. And I think
that's why I think you're going to do great, though. I think you're going to do amazingly because you already have, obviously, you have the skill set to talk. You have like the presence, like I think, and the willingness to do it. The 3 years of podcasting is not something you just throw in the bin, right? Like that is helping you a lot. And that willingness to go back to basics is something that I wish I'd had 10 years ago. I don't know, man. I think you'll do great. I don't think that there's any reason to think that you won't, And so I think that it's that thing of, all right, that's what I was going to say too. Like the balance to being aware that, okay, it's going to take a long time. There probably won't be any results, X, Y, Z, whatever. Then the other side of that is to say, but I do want this and this, like to have a very clear idea of what you want out of it in a certain amount of time. To say, like, I do want to make some money out of this. And like, because if you don't also have a clarity of vision for like where you want to take it, then it will take you longer, right? Like you're gonna just kind of make stuff, you're gonna do whatever. Like that was, at least for me, I don't know if you have any listeners that this will resonate with, but hopefully just at least one person resonates with this. That like I also used that. For me, like I went into it when I started daily vlogging in 2016. I set my goals and I was like, I want to be better at speaking on camera. I want to edit every day. I want to show up. I want to improve, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't put any subscriber goals. I didn't put any monetary goals. I didn't put anything because I was like, well, that's out of my control.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do that. But I was using that as a way of protecting myself from the disappointment of not making it. And it doesn't do you any harm to put a thing on your wall saying, but in 2 years, I'm going to have 100,000 subscribers and I'm going to have this, I'm going to have this, I'm going to have this. Because the clarity of that can then guide your decision making and hopefully help you along the way, as long as that's not the driving force, right? Like you can get a clarity of vision that hopefully gets you excited, but then you do have to come back to exactly what you're talking about and being like, okay, like, but at the same time, got to go back to basics, got to like take my time, got to learn, got to just churn away at this, and then we'll see what happens. It's a hard balance to strike. Like I don't know that I'm very good at striking it, but kind of takes both.
Yeah, I think that you can spend forever reading about it and thinking about it, but then you have got to do it eventually.
You do have to go do it. Yeah.
I think the only metric in my mind for YouTube is you just need to get to 1,000 followers and to 4,000 hours. Now, beyond that is you can't control it. But if you're talking from like a sense of like making a living out of it, well, you need to get to that point first. So I think maybe there's a before and after that. For me, after that, I've got no like 100 subscribers, 100,000. I've got no figures like that. But I think the only thing is 1,000. But I just know it takes time. Like I've been doing the coffee one for a year, and it's like, I'm a fifth of the way there. So yeah, it just takes time. But I think you got to like what you're doing. So I think that's key.
What was the name of the coffee one, just so I can add a subscriber to you right now?
Well, I got two. I got the Winging It Travel podcast. That's the YouTube channel for this podcast. And then my coffee one's called the Trendy Coffee Podcast.
Trendy Coffee Podcast.
Very simple, 5 minutes a week, somewhere in the world where I went for a coffee.
Excellent. All right. Well, you just gained a new subscriber on both channels. So there you go. Cheers, and anybody listening, make sure you go subscribe to him. It makes all the difference in the world.
It does.
Because I think it's that thing where it is a hard thing of, like, we talk about, so among friends who are YouTubers, we talk about this all the time because subscriber count in so many ways is a vanity metric, right? Like you can have somebody with 4 million subscribers earning less money than somebody with 100,000 subscribers, just based on how they've built what they're doing, how they're monetizing it. Like there's so many elements to it. So that's why nobody takes TikTok view counts as seriously, because we know that view doesn't really mean a whole lot. Like somebody's just, they saw a couple seconds, they swipe by, whatever the metric is. And similarly, like one of the benefits to YouTube is that like both view counts and subscribers still mean something, even if subscriber count don't mean as much as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know, because for me, this is me talking to myself right now. Like I've never had subscriber goals. I've never actively tried to grow. I've never done a lot of those things. And for me, a lot of that was because I was scared. Like I was both scared to fail. Obviously, failing in public sucks. But I was also scared to succeed because deep down, like my main concern was I was worried that it would demonstrate that I wasn't actually worthy. Right. Like
Mm.
I
Imposter
was wrestling
syndrome.
with imposter syndrome is a
Yeah.
huge part of it. And,
Mm.
and, just being worthy of love at a core level. Right. And so it's taken me a long time to get to wrestle with that. But now when I look at it, I still agree. Yeah, subscribers vanity metric. Like it doesn't keep me up at night that I don't have a million subscribers.
Mm.
And like I'm not that concerned about it from like so many perspectives. However, at the same time, I recognize that it would bring better business opportunities. It would also mean that there's a chance that I'm actually impacting more people, like
Mm.
and reaching more people. And I've been standing in my own way this whole time out of that fear. When growth for its own sake isn't great, growth or actually growth for its own sake is not good at all, probably, but like growth to do good is not bad. And if I could help more people have a good time in Paris, help more people feel less stress when they visit, and hopefully like just have a positive impact on more people's lives in a variety of ways. Excuse me. That seems like a worthy goal.
Yeah, I think from the travel perspective, it's overwhelming because there's so many YouTubers out there. But my partner's like, well, it's not actually really about the place, it's about them. So when
Yes.
someone's got like 10,000 subscribers, like these like travel YouTubers, you've got 90, the majority just like seeing you. And yeah, if they're watching travel and you're in Paris Beach behind me, where I've got the picture of me in the camper van, yeah, that's a bonus, and people would like to see maybe bits of that, but actually let's see you. And if I can encourage people to go to that place because it's pretty awesome in Oregon, then that's
Yeah.
a win because they
Yeah.
should go and see it because bloody awesome.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to, I mean, man, this becomes its own convoluted conversation for which I don't know that I have any answers, but I think like when it comes to comparing yourself to other people as well, or entering a crowded or like highly competitive field. I mean, YouTube is super crowded, almost no matter what you're going to get
Yeah.
into. Ultimately, the most important thing you can do is try to drill down to being exactly who you are, right? The only way you can ever actually be this is again, it might hopefully it doesn't sound cheesy to your listeners, but in reality, like the stew of things that make you who you are is what's unique.
Yeah.
Your preferences, the things you've experienced, the way that you see the world, all those things. A million people might travel to Paris. I mean, millions of people travel to Paris every year. And there are so few ways of showing the Eiffel Tower in a new way, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is you, your reaction, your experience, the way that you present it, all of it. As long as it's going through you, then it can be something special and unique. And so that would be also the push to like part of it going back to basics and understanding what other people have done before you is helping to develop that taste. So you know, oh, well, I actually really like this kind of montage. And you know what? Time lapses are definitely my thing. I don't really like drones. I do like this, whatever. And eventually, as you're playing around and you figure it out, you create through what you love and what you don't like something that is truly unique. And the
Mm.
beauty of YouTube and the internet at large is there are thousands of people, if not millions of people out there who would love to see the world through that lens.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, exactly that. It's
Because
that
like,
uniqueness. Yeah,
yeah,
it's because it can't be matched because everyone's different.
no,
So there's a market there if you're willing to put a bit of effort and consistency in and enjoy it. There's some
yeah.
fruits at the end of that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that is that thing where you don't want to fall into the get rich quick scheme side of things where you're like, oh man, I'm going to be famous, blah, blah, blah. But I think if you can get down to the root of like, why am I doing this? And do I enjoy it? You know, like you clearly enjoy what you're doing. And I think that getting into YouTube, you'll know very quickly, you already do know, right? Like in what you're making, as long as you enjoy it, um, then you can't lose either
Mm.
because maybe somebody listening enjoys making videos, but not so much that they would want to make a job of it. That's great. Now you know that. And now you make the videos when you feel like it and you get the satisfaction out of it. If you enjoyed it enough to do it all the time, and it's something that you think about all the time, you want, whatever, like whatever is driving you to do it, then again, no guarantee you'll ever make a living off of it, but at least you'll have the endurance to put in a real effort.
And it'd be fun.
And it'll be fun.
Yeah. I think it helps me that I'm a creative. I've got a degree in music. But the thing is, I quit music because I think travel took over as a story there. But I've done 10 years playing guitar up to a point where I was like really good. And people say to you, but how do I get better at guitar? You just play it.
Yeah.
But there's no science. I was, and this is why you shouldn't compare yourself to someone like, I don't know, Michael Jordan in The Last Dance, whatever it's called. He's the best of all time. I think we all agree with that. Is he happy? Well, not sure. If we look at him in that interview, I mean, he's achieved a lot, but he's still got some anger in there, and he's still a bit angry, and
he's still kind of bitter, despite being a billionaire.
Bitter. Yeah. So don't compare yourself, because on a much lower level for me, playing guitar, getting the audition, going to college, music college, guitar college, like that was 10 years of me in my bedroom just playing every night. And I'm not talking about picking up 10 minutes. That's like 2-3 hours solid. That comes back to the consistency and enjoy what you're doing. But I loved it. I love playing Hendrix and all this sort of stuff. So yeah. So I guess you would agree with the main traits would be enjoy it, consistency, and I guess ultimately putting something out there. I guess they're probably three.
You have to show you. Yeah, that's that. I would recommend the book Show Your Work for that, because I think it is that thing of like you have to show what you're doing, and you like anything. I when I was writing books, this was a problem that always came up with authors in particular, because they're another step removed from wanting to be on camera, right? That's why they're writing books.
Yeah.
And that tendency then means that they never actually show anyone their manuscript. They never give that to anyone because it's too precious and it's hard. But the problem is that if you don't put it in the light, for one, you're just robbing the world of whatever joy you've created, right? Like that's the main thing. I think that you're always robbing the world if you're not going to give away whatever it is that you've been given to create. But the other side is that we all suck at the start, and there's no shame in it. Like we all are terrible. My first book was awful. Like I look at it now and I'm just like, oh, like I cringe whenever I'm very grateful that there are people that like I gave it to back in the day that had really enjoyed it and still tell me how much they enjoyed it. And I don't doubt them, but I'm just like, I look at it and I'm like, I need to crawl under something large and heavy. But the thing was that it can be so scary. It's so nice to live in your safe, warm fantasy of like, I am the best author ever. That's where I lived for a long time. And this is a masterpiece. This is my masterpiece. And then I handed it off. And then the notes that I got back from the few people that were gracious enough not to just throw it in a fire proved to me that I was not a master. And the cool thing was that I kept going because I loved doing it. I loved telling stories and I loved writing. So I kept writing because I was dedicated to it. And I couldn't stop, and I can't stop. I have to do it. But it is terrifying to create, to start something new, and to do it in public. And so I think more power to you for getting started on a new venture in YouTube. But like for anybody listening that just wants to get started, that is it. You just have to do it. There's no other way. If you want, and I mean, if you want to be out doing something like YouTube, like there's no other way to do it. You have to put it out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One of my guitar teachers said that there's millions of people who are world-class players in their bedroom. That's a fair point.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Put them on stage. Are they world-class then? It's like, oh, maybe not. Yeah. So yeah.
I just started playing piano, so like
I literally, it's my dream. It's my future goal. Yeah.
Well, I literally today was the first time I looked up a lesson on YouTube because I'm gonna get a local teacher because I really want to actually learn. But I just started doing it, and I was like, okay, starting to get this little rhythm, and I was like, I better film a little bit just so I have it for later. And I turned the camera on, and immediately I was worse, and I couldn't. And I just I was like, and I just like leaned over to look at the camera, and I was like, I swear I was a little bit better than this at least before I turned on the camera. Like and the reality is that, like you're saying, like you just have to put yourself out there. And same with learning a language, like you were saying, you got to go to a country, immerse yourself for 3 months, and have no fear of making mistakes.
Yeah,
because we all make mistakes, even as adults. If you like who've been speaking English our entire lives, if your listeners went back, they could pick out a variety of grammatical errors and random. I think I said then when I meant this or something earlier. Like there's you still make mistakes no matter what. Like you just gotta like let yourself go and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, just get out there. I think that's that conversation answered a lot of my YouTube questions actually.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I think we'll just crack on to the end bit, which is just where people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest and fastest would be go to YouTube and look Jay Swanson, Jay Swanson. I saw somebody type it in just Jay Swanson once with a letter, and I was like, oh, no,
Okay, right,
spell
yeah.
out Jay,
Yeah,
Jay Swanson. And yeah, from YouTube, you can find me obviously on my website. Anyway, just Google me, you'll find it. You'll find
I'll put some links in the show notes so people would.
it. Okay, sounds great.
If,
That was a terrible pitch.
if they're
That was
lazy, they can click on the links. Fine.
exactly. Or go to ParisInMyPocket.com and use, I think was it winging
Winging
it
it 15.
15 yeah,
Yeah.
winging it 15 for 15% off.
Yeah, there you go. So get buying. Okay.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums up all the questions I have at the end. So we're going to finish the podcast. I have some quickfire travel questions. This is a bit of a fun feature I do at the end.
Okay, awesome.
And these are your favorite things in the world that you see. So
it's travel question time.
You are going to answer the first one. It's going to be 3 favorite countries you travel to. That's
oh gosh, 3 favorite countries I've traveled
France.
to.
Is that going to be an obvious one?
Okay, the non-obvious ones. I gave you a couple good. I like South Africa is really high up there.
Yeah.
I had a great time in Finland seeing the Northern Lights.
Oh, dream.
Yeah. I actually took Cooper, my dog, so I have photos of him under the Northern Lights. That's pretty cool. South Africa, so that's the opposite poles basically, and then somewhere in the middle, let's say Taiwan. India. Actually, I could go back to India any day of the week. Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, so let's do that. India, Finland, and South Africa. That hits 3 continents and most latitudes.
Okay. And what about 3 countries you've not traveled to that'd be next on your hit list?
Japan. I was supposed to go, but COVID shut us down on the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole story, but thankfully did not get stuck in Japan. So I have not been to Japan yet. I would really love to go. I have not been a lot of places in Asia, honestly. Like I've never been to Thailand, and for every time it comes up, it's like that looks really, really nice. I would really like to go there. And then Madagascar. I'm hoping to go to Madagascar next year. And it just looks also incredible, and I can't wait to go.
Yeah, a lot of stuff on internet a minute about Madagascar. I think it's upcoming. I think a lot of people are going to go there.
It's cool.
What about 3 favorite cuisines on your travels?
3 favorite cuisines from my travels. I realize that I'm not gonna. I feel like this is dangerous. Okay, I'll say that like just in general, like in India, like I could be a vegetarian in India because the food is so good.
Yeah,
and everybody made me eat meat because they were like, "Hey, you'll eat meat," and then they just made me like they're like whatever like dish they'd be like, "Yeah, but the white boy,
eat it."
So I was like, "Oh man!" So it was always very very good, and I always loved it. But anytime I could get a purely vegetarian meal, I was always blown away. Pani puri, so good. Oh man, if you know pani puri,
the
soup, crispy soup dumplings.
Yeah.
Whoever thought that could be a thing? So good. So maybe I should have just said pani puri that was a great discovery the last time I was in Mumbai. But then from there, this is going to be a weird one, but I really love West African Lebanese shawarmas. So there's always a Lebanese vendors in like every country I ever lived in West Africa, and the shawarmas there are just different. Like they use like chicken off of a kebab or something, but it's not the shaved chicken, but like a proper chicken breast. And the garlic aioli was always so good. I don't know, it's just something about it that like it's hard to replicate. And then Percy pigs.
Accepted. They're vegan, aren't they? Technically,
I believe they are. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. You hit the vegan market there. Okay. And what about if you could sit in one city in the world, drink coffee, and watch the world go by? That's not Paris. Where are you going to sit?
Maybe Copenhagen.
Oh yeah, trendy.
They've got a really good coffee scene. It's much less hectic. It's a nice, warm, cozy vibe without being as cold as some Nordic places, and also, I don't know, just a nice aesthetic.
Okay. Any country that you didn't like? Always controversial discussion.
I was about to make a joke at Canada's expense after all the risks I took talking about Canada earlier. But I love Canada. I'm not going to say that. Any country I didn't like? Well, I don't know. Nothing's coming to mind.
Or specific place, maybe.
I've definitely had, I mean, I crashed my motorcycle about 5 times in Benin, but that's not Benin's fault.
No,
Um,
that's definitely not their fault. No.
so that was rough, and I definitely suffered many injuries and had great stories, but that was brutal. Um, any place? Well, okay, I will say this. I struggled the most, and if you read my book, Sea of the Unknown, if you want to read that whole story about how I got to Paris, um, Springfield, Illinois, and I weren't meant to be together. I recognize that it has Abe Lincoln's presidential library and about 30 Abe Lincoln impersonators, which probably puts it pretty high on someone's list. But I really struggled spending as much time as I did there. And I met some wonderful people, which is why I struggle to say. But at the same time, if there was one place in the world that I would honestly hope to never go back to for longer than a few hours, probably Springfield, Illinois.
Okay, I accept that one. What about favorite beach?
Favorite beach? Oh, Berry Beach. Not one that anybody can get to very easily though. So, um, and definitely not the beach at Nice. But I was just in Anglet. If you've been to Basque Country,
Oh,
the
okay. Yeah.
Biarritz Bayet Bayonne trio, and I actually had a place. I was very kind to myself like 6 or 9 months ago, and I was like, I have to book a vacation or I won't take one. So I
Mhm.
found this like rare gem of a find that's never free kind of a thing, and booked a not too expensive vacation in Anglet, and I just literally would walk up to the window and it was ocean.
Oh,
Um,
dream.
and incredible. And it's the Atlantic, so it's huge waves, and it was just amazing. So if you Basque Country, it's a wonderful part of both France and Spain. So I absolutely love it.
Interesting. Goes into my next question quite nicely is apart from Paris, three places in France that you would recommend people to visit.
Oh, well, Basque Country is way up there,
Mm.
obviously. People are lovely, and it's just the food is good, and they've got some great beer. Lille, if we're talking about beer as well, and food as well.
Ah,
Lille is a sleeper. I wouldn't skip it if you get the chance. And then Marseille is probably my favorite. I love
interesting.
Marseille so much. It's very close to nature, which I'm not as big of a nature boy as you would expect from the Northwest. But uh, the national parks there are incredible. The people are really friendly. The influx of Parisians has actually been mostly, I think, at least maybe as a Parisian, a benefit. There's so much fun and interesting stuff happening,
Hmm.
lots of art, and it's not. It's still so well connected to the rest of the country and Europe. I really love Marseille.
Okay. And to finish, a final few words of maybe a bit of wisdom about why someone should travel, because it's a travel podcast, of course. But also you could
Hey,
maybe put in there, a bit of like recording your travels or like, why should someone like record? Maybe could they write it down or they could do YouTube or do a podcast? Like, why should they do both?
yeah, I think travel for me was always. I wanted to see the world largely because I felt like I grew up in such a small part of it, and I knew that there were ways of seeing the world, ways of living, just kind of ways of being that were different and that had to have something to offer. And I think there's such a great gift in traveling to meet new people, to be challenged, and to see that like you have more in common with everyone than you don't.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know if that necessarily counts, but for me, there was a huge appeal in trying to go out and learn and confront myself in that. And I think the best part about like recording it, I'm somebody that's only really learned how to go back and look at stuff that I've recorded recently. I'm somebody who records it and chucks it and then keeps moving. Um, but once you get to a place where you can handle looking at your journal entries or your photos, your videos, whatever it is you took, there's something really amazing about going back. Like on Patreon right now, we're actually releasing vlogs that I filmed in 2015 on a different channel that
Oh,
nobody's
wow.
seen, right? They've only
Yeah.
got like 30 views, and it's actually, I didn't want to see it. Like I pitched it as being a cringe fest. I was like, get ready for the cringe fest. But then when I actually went back and watched a couple of them, even though they're not good or easy to watch or whatever, in so many ways, I'm so grateful for them because they captured that time in Springfield, Illinois,
Mm.
or they captured that time that I was struggling, to move to France or this or that or whatever, my time in Taiwan, and you get to see how much you've grown. The only way that you can ever see how much you've grown is to measure yourself against your past. And the only way to measure yourself against your past is to have made measurements along the way.
Yeah.
And so I think recording yourself, your thoughts, your impressions, all of that, even if you don't record exactly what you were thinking, when you go back and you look at it, you will know. You'll remember, oh yeah, I thought that was a terrible dish, and now it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I didn't speak that language, and now I do. So there's something really beautiful about that, and seeing how much you've grown. And I think it's an act of self-love at that point to recognize, like, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, that's a great way to finish. You're doing okay.
Yeah,
Jay, it's been
doing
a great
okay.
chat. We covered a lot of ground. A bit of travel in there, a bit of Paris, a bit of YouTube, bit of we even delved into a bit of politics at the start. So
So whoever
briefly.
we didn't polarize out,
Yeah,
they're still with us at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for coming on and making time. It's been great fun. And
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.
Yeah, happy travels.
Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.